Hey, what's going on YouTube? Or Storm here with another little deck profile for you guys this afternoon. I'll be profiling DDDs with some of the new support cards. The great thing about the new support cards is finally, you DDD players out there, you finally have some consistent scales. The biggest problem was that Kepler and Galilei would constantly change their scales every standby phase, so it would kind of hinder what you could pendulum summon. But now that we have Copernicus and Newton, we actually have consistent scales on top of like a slew of other support cards. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to deck profile. First off, 2 copies of DD7 Copernicus. I find 2 is kind of the ideal number unless you're playing Necro Slime. Because when this card is normal special summon, it's an Armageddon Knight. It sends one DD or Dark Contract to your graveyard. So from your deck to the graveyard. So in that respect, I feel like if you're gonna run 3, you need to play like a couple copies of Necro Slime. Necro Slime's not a bad card. I don't play it. It's really good for recovery, but most of the time with new support, I find that I don't have an issue with recovery. That typically I can recover pretty easily from board wipes, especially now that, and it's not as much of an issue now that Existon is banned. So the Copernicus Copernicus also has the effect that it can negate spell cards that burn you for damage. You can destroy it to negate the effect, but it's only be used once while it's in the pendulum zone. So, but it destroys itself, so you can just kind of recycle it and reuse it, so it's not really a problem. Then 3 copies of the new Tuner monster, level 1 Tuner, DD Lamia. Lamia is a good card. I like I said about this deck is that like this card is just one more way to keep the contracts from burning you. So this card's effect is if it's in your hand or graveyard, you can special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. So but the cost is to send a Dark Contract or DD monster from your field side of the field or your hand to the graveyard. So basically, say you have a gate out and you don't have a Leonidas to keep yourself from getting burned. You can just send it to the graveyard and then go ahead and make whatever. Go ahead and go through your play. So it's really nice. It can keep yourself from getting burned. And it's a level 1 tuner, so it's more 1-for-1 targets. Because one of the things I noticed is that I would roll through 1-for-1 targets. So now it's not so much of an issue. And then 3 Swirl Slime. I know in previous builds I only ran 1, but 3 is kind of a good number, I feel like, now, because with the consistent scales, you can just spam multiple fusions and then just... It's really good, and especially because it combos really well with Ragnarok as well. And then 2 copies of Winsome King Apocalypse. This is one of the new cards. I think it's one of the cover cards for the structure deck. This card is pretty interesting because it can actually special summon itself by the Pendulum Zone by banishing 2 DD monsters from your graveyard. The monster effect is that you can, if it's in your hand or graveyard during your opponent's turn, you can special summon it by destroying 2 face-up spell or traps you control. So that includes your Pendulum Zone, as you can blow up your own Pendulum Zone to bring this out of the graveyard, but you can also blow up your gates, which is really cool. Like, it's basically gives you like a kind of a bit of a floating aspect, which is really nice. Also, it's like one more way to keep yourself from getting burned by the Covenant cards. And of course, Newton's Pendulum effect is pretty similar to Copernicus, but it negates trap effects that burn you. It can, instead of being an Armageddon Knight though for its monster effect, you can discard it to add 1 DD or Dark Contract from your graveyard to your hand. So it allows a little bit more recycling, which is nice. And then of course the obligatory 3 Kepler. Kepler's your searcher for all your covenants, so you kind of got to run it at 3. It's still testing really well, for obvious reasons. And of course 3 Ragnarok. Ragnarok's just a boss monster. Being out like this card wins. This card literally allows me to play around so many like ridiculous fields of my opponent. If my opponent has some kind of protection monster, that's where this card comes in. It's also got a pendulum, really good pendulum effect. Being able to, it's like another copy of Genghis. Basically, allows you to, when it's in the pendulum zone, you can, when you special summon one, you can get another one. So it's really good. And then the good thing, this card is like it's a 1 card. If you have a Armageddon in the graveyard, it's a 1 card Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga is just amazing. So yeah, this card's really good. Then 2 Leonidas, like I said, between Lamia, between King Apocalypse, you have a lot of cards that can keep yourself from burning yourself, but you still need to play a couple copies of Leonidas, just in case. And it's another level 7, so it works. So it allows you to make a couple of rank 7s that can win you the game. Then of course 2 Judgment King Armageddon. This card is really good. I find a lot of times my opponent tries to Regeki to play around my big fields. This card counteracts Regeki. It can only be destroyed by spell or trap effects that that target it. So if your opponent tries Regeki, they try to Dark Hole, and you have this out, not only does it stay on the field, but it can cop whatever other monsters got destroyed. You can add the monster with the highest attack to this card, but it can't attack directly. Not that that's really, typically your opponent's going to Regeki on their turn, so it really comes in handy. Then 3 copies of, for the spells, 3 copies of Contract with Covenant with, or Dark Contract with the Gate. Basically, this is your like Searcher. You activate this, you can add 1, and of course all the Covenants burn you for 1,000 during each of your standby phases. 1 copy of Allure. Allure is still really good in this deck. Like, I'm not running Upstarts because I find it's pretty consistent now. 1 Regeki, because it's pretty much a staple right now. 1 for 1 because we have 6 targets. You know, you would pretty much want 1 for 1 no matter what in this deck. And then 2 Swamp Kings. I find 3 Swamp King gets really cloggy. I find that you really don't need 3. I know a lot of players play 3, but you know, you shouldn't need more than 2 of this card typically in my experience. And of course, probably the best spell card of the format, 2 copies of Wavering Eyes. You know, if you're playing a Pendulum deck, probably main decking this at 2 or if not 3. It's just too good not to play, especially because we're in a Pendulum. We're pretty much headed for a Pendulum-based format. 1 copy of Chicken Game. Chicken Game's actually pretty good in DDDs because it keeps your Covenants from burning you as long as your life points are lower than your opponent's. And typically you don't mind paying some life points in a deck where you have cards like D-Arc that just keep feeding yourself life points, so it's not really an issue. Then for the traps, 2 copies of Valkyrie. This got bumped to 2 because, you know, like I said, Pendulum-based format. It's like an MS. It allows you to pop your opponent's Pendulum Scales by sending a DD or Dark Contract from your hand to the graveyard. And also on your opponent's turn, all of your monsters gain 1,000 attacks, so it turns your D-Arcs into 3,800. Your Judgment becomes a 4,000 during your opponent's turn only. So that's really good. And then 2 copies of DDD Human Resources. This card is actually, a lot of people tell me not to play this card, but I find it allows me to play around a lot of my opponents. Like, my opponent tries to disrupt me in the middle of my play. Like if I try to about to Pendulum Summon, I can just flip this and just dodge and just continue comboing off. By shuffling 3 DDD monsters from your field, hand, or graveyard, or in the Pendulum Zone, you can add 2 from your deck to your hand. So it allows you to dodge a lot of back row and the like. 1 copy of Vanities because it's kind of the best trap card of the form. Pretty much the best trap card, or one of the best ever in the game. I feel like as long as it's legal, you might as well play it. 2 copies of Call of the Haunted. Call of the Haunted kind of allows you to come back from if your play gets disrupted. I kind of feel like it's actually been really good in testing. So yeah. Now for the extra deck, for the fusions, 1 copy of Oblivion King Kaiser Ragnarok. In some builds I did play this card at 2, but I find if you get this card out, there's no reason you shouldn't win that turn. Being able to like steal like even monsters that have targeting protection like the Cosmos ships and just buffing this monster up is just amazing. It's really good. Then one of the new cards, DDD Cruel King Beowulf. This card's a bit different than the other DDDs because it requires 1 DDD and 1 DD monster. So you can make this with Swirl Slime, which is interesting. But the first effect is that all your DDD monsters will now do piercing damage when this card's on the field. So your opponent tries to go defensive. This card's just going to prevent them from doing that. And once per turn during your standby phase, you can just blow up. You can just heavy storm all the cards in the spell and trap zone. So it won't blow up your Pendulums, but it will blow up all of your Covenants if they're going to burn you for a bunch of damage. Then 1 D-Arc. I feel like you don't really need more than 1. You can kind of keep looping it back over and over again. So typically, just the 1 on the sitting there on the field will just like put you into basically create a win condition because you'll have so many life points. 2 copies of Genghis. Genghis is still, I think, probably the best fusion monster simply because it allows you to keep bringing more resources from your graveyard. And then when it does bite the dust, you can just recycle 1 of your Covenants from the graveyard. So really nice. Now for the Synchros, 1 Leo. I would say I do like Leo, but I feel like Leo is a bit mediocre this format. If you can get a hold of it, you can also play it. If Konami does opt to reprint it in Premium Gold 3, you could probably play Ascension Sky Dragon over this card. But I feel like Leo is still pretty good. It's just not, it's subpar because we've got generic cards, like pretty generic cards like Ignister that can just get over it way too easily. Then 1 copy of Trish. Trish is too good this format. I feel like Trish is always like an optimal card. I feel like you pretty much, if you can make Trish, you run it, and the card is just really too good not to play. 1 copy of Void Ogre Dragon, because a lot of times if you have this out and all your cards set, your opponent is going to have a lot more trouble playing around your board. 1 copy of Cursed King Siegfried. The main effect of this card is that During either player's turn, if they activate a face-up spell or trap card on the field, it can negate the effects until the next standby phase. This card is interesting. It's a lot like, think of like if you guys know how number 22 Zombie Stein or Contrast Hero Chaos works, this card can negate Regeki or Dark Hole because when it's activated, it's considered a face-up card. But the other thing about this card is it can negate your Covenants so they don't burn you, because it turns them off until your next standby phase. So it's pretty interesting, and when it does bite the dust, you can gain 1,000 life points for each dark card you control, so it kind of pays for itself. And of course, the one Alexander's a really, it's much like Genghis. It allows you to keep recurring resources, so it's really nice. One copy of Formula because you make it with Lamia and Kepler, and it keeps your Keplers off the board so you don't take a bunch of damage, and drawing cards is never bad. For the Exceeds, one Felgrand, there's some situations where Kali Yuga may not be the optimal play. You want to go a little more defensive rather than pulling out a Kali Yuga, so Felgrand kind of fits the bill. Then one Kali Yuga is like, when I first read Kali Yuga, I saw it in the anime, and they even nerfed the anime effect, but this card is just absurd. When it succeeds summon, your opponent basically can't do anything for the rest of the turn, and then you can heavy storm the board and reuse your dark contracts from the graveyard. It's just absurd. This card is just ridiculous. And it's almost a win condition. Like, if you resolve this and it hits the field and your opponent doesn't warning, like, they're gonna be in trouble. One Draco Sack because it kind of works with the deck. Like, Draco Sack's tokens actually kind of work with the deck, because if you have Lamia, you can actually synchro up for Alexander with 2 of the tokens, so it kind of works together in Draco Sack's protection. Draco Sack's still a pretty decent card. Then one Flare Metal because your opponent's low on life and you make this card. It's like a pseudo cowboy for rank 7 decks. Like, they literally, if they're low on life points, they just basically scoop up their cards. So anyway, guys, as always, thank you guys for watching the video today. Really appreciate it when you guys watch my videos. Let me know what you guys down in the comment section, what you guys think of this DDD deck profile, any suggestions or changes I should make. And anyway, guys, as always, thank you guys for watching. So, Orstorp, signing out.